Lost? Snow White? A shadowy gang of about 10 sinister figures emerged, their faces concealed by hoods and scarves. Their intentions were as inscrutable as the markings on their skin. Each gaze felt like a warning, a silent proclamation. You're not welcome. I glanced at my pristine uniform, contrasting sharply with their worn attire. Just ensuring the ambulance reaches a kid, I asserted calmly. A tense standoff ensued, their uncertainty momentarily eclipsing their bravado. With a silent pressure of urgency, I maintained eye contact until one relented, granting us passage. In that moment, it was evident. We weren't just paramedics here. We were outsiders, intruders in a realm frozen in despair. This wasn't just a place. It was a chronicle of broken promises and shattered dreams, where hopelessness hung thick in the air, like a toxic fog, frozen somewhere between the wreckage of 1993 and the unmet expectations of 2002. My heart hammered in my chest as we passed by the group, their silent stares following me like a shadow. The lobby welcomed us with its familiar blend of stale urine, mold, and a lingering cigarette fog that clung to the peeling paint like a secondhand smoker's cough, the distinctive perfume of despair and poverty. The worn carpeting muffled our footsteps like a nervous cough. As we passed by a row of beaten-up mailboxes, most of them were hanging open, with mail spilling out onto the floor. The Bayou Vista apartments on the edge of town were notorious for trouble, a melting pot of low-income families and transient individuals, the very heart of gang territory. This place gives me the creeps, I muttered. Ramirez nodded in agreement. Yeah, it's seen better days. But this wasn't my first rodeo here. Each floor of this building had been witness to domestic violence and OD cases where we had aided the police. This time, however, the police were absent. The call seemed routine, and with understaffing issues, they were cherry-picking their responses. The stairs were the only viable option. The elevator, a monument to the building's modern conveniences, lay dormant, with its doors permanently ajar, revealing a yawning abyss that promised a quicker descent via gravity than any questionable elevator ride. The higher we climbed, the stronger the sense of abandonment became. Peeling paint, boarded up windows and doors marked with signs of forced entry. And yet, amid the decay, there were signs of life. An occasional wail of a baby, the faint sound of a TV from behind a locked door, a child's bicycle abandoned in the hallway. It was a reminder of the resilience of those who had no choice but to call this place home. Finally, on the top floor, a lone mother stood waiting anxiously outside her apartment door. "My child," the woman began, her voice trembling. "Climbing, kitchen, fall." Her hands fluttered, trying to bridge the gap between her broken English and the urgency of the situation. Her worried eyes, more expressive than her limited words. From her features and accent, it seemed she was likely of Chinese descent. "He now speak other Italian." Italian? I blinked, unsure of what she meant. This was either a serious language barrier or the start of a very strange day, if it hadn't been already. Stepping into the apartment, the grim symphony of Bayou Vista apartments faded. The air held a strange serenity within the confines of the apartment. Spotless floors gleamed under harsh overhead light, a stark contrast to the peeling paint and flickering fluorescence of the hallway. This unexpected oasis amidst decay sparked a silent question. How did such meticulous order coexist with the building's neglect? On a woven mat in the living room, a young boy lay motionless. His father, a man whose face mirrored the building's despair, hovered beside him, his hands clenched in silent prayer. Their features spoke volumes, a family, Chinese, seemingly misplaced in this desolate corner of the city. "You hear that, right?" Ramirez, my partner, muttered, his voice a low rumble. Glancing at him, I strained to listen, catching only the faint, hollow gurgle of the building. The father met my gaze, his face etched with a mixture of concern and a strange apathy. "Sleeping?" he repeated, his voice flat. I knelt beside the boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, dressed in pajamas that seemed too big for his slender frame, murmuring something. His eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing dark pupils that darted like trapped animals before slipping shut again. A fresh bruise marked the top of his head, already turning purple. "No blood," the father muttered, the words hanging heavy in the air. Relief flickered through me, quickly extinguished by a rising tide of unease. The kid had been mumbling something continuously after he fell, and that he suddenly also had strange panic attacks. His voice held a hint of confusion, but his eyes remained unsettlingly blank. As I checked the kid's vitals, I strained to catch his faint mumbling. It was clear he needed to get to the hospital. But as I struggled to make out the words, a strange familiarity washed over me. They weren't gibberish. They sounded oddly familiar, though not Italian. Where had I heard them before? That's when I decided to see the bruise on his head, see if the ice packs did it any good. But that's when the kid seemed to have triggered yet again. He thrashed on the woven mat, spouting incomprehensible words in a frantic outburst. It was the 5th time in as many minutes, the mother informed me, her voice laced with despair. But as the garbled sounds filled the sterile air, a realization dawned on me, one that Ramirez grasped even sooner. "Spanish, Mark," he murmured, his voice low and urgent. "He's speaking Spanish." I calmed the boy, carefully explaining the situation to his anxious parents. "Has he been exposed to any Spanish lately? TV shows, friends, neighbors?" I inquired. They exchanged bewildered glances, shaking their heads in unison. The pieces started to click. Foreign accent syndrome. A rare condition where a head injury alters speech patterns, in some cases even leading to a complete language shift. But the puzzle didn't quite fit. This family spoke Mandarin, not a word of Spanish ever uttered within their walls, and they rarely set foot outside the door. 2 options stood before me. Either they were oblivious to something that may have caused this Spanish accent, or they were deliberately withholding information. Ramirez met my gaze, his face etched with worry. "He keeps saying something about his mother," he murmured, his voice tinged with concern. "It's hard to make out, but it sounds like, 'I want mommy. I want to go home.'" The mother's face, etched with worry, flickered with confusion as her eyes darted between us and the boy. Her hand instinctively reached for her husband's, her knuckles turning white. A heavy silence descended, broken only by the kid's occasional mumble. These cases with little kids always threw me off balance, putting me into the maelstrom of human emotions swirling around me. Taking a deep breath, I decided to cut through the tension. "Have you recently moved here?" I asked, hoping a change of topic might offer some clarity. Perhaps the new environment is causing him some anxiety. The father, his jaw clenched, muttered a terse response in Mandarin. The mother, however, spoke softly, her voice barely a whisper. They came from China a few months ago, she explained. He wakes up often at night, restless, although less now. The father added gruffly, "There's no place, no good for children, too loud, too crowd. We saving enough to move somewhere quite soon." I nodded, with understanding dawning upon me. While the boy's condition remained a mystery, his discomfort in this chaotic environment seemed evident. What still didn't click, though, was where the heck did the Spanish come from then? Ramirez's brow furrowed as the boy's mumbling intensified. "He hurts me," he translated, his voice strained. "Will I ever see Mom and Dad again? And is he going to kill me?" The parents were getting more and more nervous, but the boy was starting to wake up. He appeared slightly dazed, but thankfully managed to sit up on his own. However, his gaze remained fixed on something. Initially, I thought he was looking at his mother, or Ramirez, but it was something else entirely. His eyes were fixated on his bed, a mattress on the floor, visible through the open hallway door. There was a subtle change on his face as I pointed to the mattress. It triggered a wave of screams, punctuated by rapid mumbling in 2 languages. I recognized the first as Mandarin, similar to what the parents spoke. Then, in a panicked voice, the boy looked straight into my eyes and uttered something in Spanish. "Save me!" The father, sweat dripping down his face, hesitated for a moment before speaking, stealing a quick look at his wife. "He didn't say anything," he finally muttered, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "He's just scared." His words contradicted what we had witnessed. A knot formed in my stomach. The complete sentence, starting with the boy's native Mandarin and ending in Spanish, felt off-putting. While I trusted Ramirez's translation, the parents' denial created a discord in the narrative. The father grew increasingly agitated, insisting we prioritize taking the child to the hospital. I acknowledged this, while reminding him of our protocol to assess the scene. Turning to the mother for her insight, they engaged in a hushed conversation in Mandarin, leaving me momentarily on hold. After a brief exchange, the mother disclosed the boy's claim of hearing voices when he lies in bed at night. I approached the bedroom consumed by curiosity, instructing Ramirez to prepare the boy for transport. Suddenly, the mother materialized right behind me, her voice a sharp, "No, please," that sent a jolt through me. My gut lurched. Clearly, I'd crossed a line. I wasn't a detective with a warrant, just a paramedic on a call. Examining their apartment without permission was a rookie mistake, a dark stain on my otherwise decent bedside manner. The father followed closely, muttering a mix of broken English and Mandarin, seemingly anxious for us to leave, and abruptly blurted, "We don't want any involvement. Just take him to the hospital." His voice held a hint of nervousness, and he quickly fell silent, as if realizing he had revealed too much. Intrigued by the father's sudden shift, I inquired, "Involvement? What do you mean?" But he remained silent, and so did his wife. The child's insistent gestures and the parent's sudden, panicked reaction made it impossible to dismiss the voices as a mere post-fall hallucination. Now, the possibility loomed large that the family harbored a secret, something unsettling enough to warrant such a visceral response. Suddenly, the gravity of the situation hit me. I had almost forgotten we had a kid to take to the hospital. The tension wasn't lost on Ramirez either. He called us away from the awkward silence, his voice booming from the living room. "We got to get this kid to the hospital," he announced urgently. "He's crying, saying his head hurts." At the hospital, after handing the family over to the medical staff, a sense of duty gnawed at me. I wasted no time and contacted Robert Johnson, a police officer and personal friend, who understood the nuances of navigating sensitive situations with finesse. In recounting the remarkable events that had unfolded before me, my words tumbled out in a rush, fueled by adrenaline and a strange gut feeling that refused to be silenced. With a steady tone, he assured me that he would delve into the matter. As the weeks passed, the incident at Bayou Vista Apartments lingered in my mind like a lingering shadow. Seeking closure, I consulted with a nurse who confirmed our suspicions of foreign language syndrome. The boy was enrolled in speech therapy. Yet just when it seemed like the story might fade into memory, shocking news hit us. 2 girls, who had vanished in Mexico weeks ago, were discovered next door. The boy's ability to quote verbatim conversations he overheard from his bed through the paper-thin walls unveiled a sinister reality hidden in plain sight. His parents later admitted they had sometimes heard cries from the neighboring apartment where a solitary man resided. Despite their suspicions, a deep-rooted fear of reprisal from their perilous neighbors and their distrust of law enforcement kept them from getting involved. It was a wake-up call, revealing how darkness can lurk in plain sight. And it made me wonder if, without that kid's fall, those poor girls might have been trapped in that hellhole forever, or faced even worse. It serves as a stark reminder that unforeseen events can sometimes lead to significant breakthroughs.